Hey there. I've got an old Boker Sportsman's knife or camp knife there on the table. It's actually on a 2018 Boker catalog on the page that shows the modern versions of the same. And I believe this knife is a pre-World War II knife, but if not, maybe then the early 50s. And I can talk about how to date these in a minute. But before I get into talking about that and looking at this knife specifically, let me just tell you a little bit about Boker's history, because Boker is a very storied knife maker with a very long history. The company gives its founding date as 1869. That's the year that Heinrich Boker opened the first full-scale knife factory in Solingen, Germany. But the Boker family's involvement with knives goes back to as early as the late 16th century. So there's over 400 years of history there. And it can get kind of confusing because in more modern times, there were three brothers that broke up and went around the world and started different operations. Heinrich went to Solingen and started the Boker from Germany that we know about. His brother Herman went to New York City and started Boker USA about the same time, and those two companies were very closely affiliated for quite a while. And then the younger brother Robert, he ended up in Mexico and started Casa Boker. So it can get pretty confusing, but I'm just going to be talking about German Bokers from Solingen. And the actual name of that company is Heinrich Boker Baumwerk GmbH. Now, Baumwerk translates to tree works. And I'll talk about why, that's tree works and why you see tree brand and the tree symbol and things like that in a minute. But GmbH, I'm really not sure what German words that translates that stands for, but I do know it means limited liability company. And that's one way, I guess, that you can tell a private company from a public company in Germany. Public companies usually have the abbreviation AG. So yeah, the tree is pretty prominent in Boker's history. Apparently there was an old, very large chestnut tree that grew outside of the Boker's first small tool shop in Remscheid, Germany. And when Heinrich Boker moved to Solingen, he was looking for, like a universal symbol or a logo that he could put on his knives, and he settled on the symbol of the big chestnut tree that grew outside of that facility that they came from. So I think that's pretty interesting. Boker says that no knife has left that Solingen manufacturer since 1869 without the tree symbol on it. So that's really cool. Now this model, they also say this model, this Sportsman's or camp model, has been in production since 1869. But they have a hard time proving it. And the reason why is in 1944, toward the end of 1944, in November, there was a sustained Allied bombing raid on Solingen. Solingen was deemed a target. It was an industrial city, supported Nazi Germany. So the Allies went in there and over 2 days just basically obliterated the city, and along with it, Boker's factory, inventory, tools, records, catalogs, the whole works. Later, the Boker employees came back after the war. They rebuilt the factory and they restarted production. But a lot of the records were lost. And Boker really doesn't have a clear record of, its models, the model changes, production numbers, and things like that. So it can be pretty challenging trying to identify and date some of these knives. But that makes it, I think, even all the more interesting. This knife, I think, is pre-World War II for a few reasons. And I'm going to be relying a lot on a Knife World magazine article that appeared in 2009, and it's excellent, and I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But it's so good that even Boker uses it on its website. There's a link on Boker's website to this article so you can learn more about Boker's history. But that article says that Boker's, with a badge on the front that say Solingen are post-World War II. Those without Solingen at the bottom are pre-World War II. So that's one clue here that this may be pre-World War II, pre-1944, before the factory was destroyed. The other thing that I go on is just the blade and the stamps. These are carbon steel blades and carbon steel tools, so they rust and they pit and they corrode very easily. But here on this one you can see we still have a very legible blade etching, tree brand, And then you see arrows at the end. Boker used those arrows as kind of logos as well. Now it doesn't say Tree Brand Classic like more modern ones do. But at the bottom there you can see 7593. That's, I believe, the model number. I'm not sure if that was later changed to 182 or 182 refers to the pattern number. I'm not sure. That's a very old blade etching. Also, the tank stamp. The tank stamp reads Heinrich Boker & Co., Baumwerk, Solingen, Germany, Almania. Almania is just Spanish for Germany, so they were just using a couple different languages there to tell you where the knife was made. One other clue in dating Boker knives is if you have an umlaut over the O in Boker, your knife is post 1932. So you can see there we have two dots over the O in Boker. So this knife is at least post 1932. But Knife Magazine gives this, there's a chart in that article that shows the different tang stamps and gives you date ranges. And they give this one as between 1932, actually up until the present, but primarily up to circa 1950. And then a couple other things. One is if your blade has the tree stamp on the back, it generally, but not always, is older than one that has the tree stamp on the front. And then this is just a personal observation, but I've noticed that the older ones tend to have this detail on the bail. And the bail's at the front, which is interesting. But you can see here there's like a couple of lines, an X, a couple of lines, maybe a dot and a line. And I don't see that on knives like, say, from the 60s or 70s even. So that's the main blade. Let's just talk about the outside of the knife a little more. First of all, these scales. They're made to look like maybe deer horn or antler, but they are synthetic. And I'm thinking they're probably Bakelite or Bakelite, which was one of the earliest forms of plastic. Bakelite was patented in 1909, and so it was in wide use by by 1944 or so. It was used mostly for like electrical insulators because it had really good insulating property. It was very heat resistant, but it also showed up in household items like cookware and toys, even pistol grips and buttstocks and things like this. Now the more recent ones are Delrin. So the base model is Delrin, and I don't know if you can see this, but right here in the catalog it says Boker Camp Knife Delrin. But Delrin is a more modern plastic. It came out in the mid-50s. I think it was patented in 1956 by DuPont. So I don't think this is probably Delrin, although they are today. I know maybe it's supposed to look like imitation stag, but to me it looks like tree bark, maybe like an old tree trunk. And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but if so, I think that's cool because it ties in with the tree brand logo and tree works and all that. So very, very cool. So just the other tools. I mean, this one's going to have the older style can opener. And it also has the tree stamp on the back. If you can look in the lower left-hand corner there, you can see it very faintly. Get my light up here a little bit. There we go. Now, just a can opener like that alone does not mean your Boker is really that old, because I do believe they used those up until the 60s or 70s. Nowadays, they use a flat, more modern can opener. That's one of the few changes between the knives you can buy today and the really old ones. A couple of changes I've identified are the can opener, no Solingen on the badge, maybe the detail on the bail. That's about it. Now the only thing really wrong with this knife is that the screwdriver cap lifter was broken and chipped, so I had to reprofile that and bring it down. Thankfully it did not get into the cap lifter, so that works just fine. It also now works just fine as a screwdriver, but it is about 1/4 of an inch too short. Also here you can see the tree stamp on the back. All the tools on the top have that. And then here's the small blade. And this small blade perhaps has been reprofiled as well. It's hard to tell. Some of the old ones have a little stubbier look. I do know that the new ones at least tend to have a more elongated or tapered blade. So if that has been shortened, somebody did a very good job of it. But also there is your tree stamp again on the back. And then the back tools, you do have a corkscrew. It's rather long, I think 5-turn corkscrew. And here you can see it has brass liners. It does have nickel silver bolsters and pins. I'm really not sure what the shield material is made out of. It's probably nickel silver. And then you have an awl or a punch, has a little indentation there for you to get your thumbnail in. And this reminds me a lot of a Boy Scout knife or something, kind of a dull tip, but a very sharp edge here for scraping. And this one's, kind of hollowed out on the back, and to me it looks like it may have been blued at one time, maybe just to protect that area from rust. All right, so that's been a look at a vintage Boker camp or sportsman's knife, model 7593 or 182, which Boker says they've been making since 1869. Hey, if you want to see a modern version of this knife in stainless steel with beautiful premium handle materials, check out Joe's on Messer HQ. I'll put the link in the description box below. Thanks for watching.